You had a good cold open idea.
In thinking of a cold open, I was like, I bet Weston has good cold opens that he's used on people. I want to know like some of the first impressions, first meeting someone. What are some of your most memorable ways that you've like gotten under somebody's skin?
Gosh, I don't know. I don't even know. I guess I don't even know when I'm doing it.
We'll try something else. Thanks, Colin. This is our first time.
Welcome to the Narrowgate Podcast. This is our very first Narrowgate Podcast.
It's the podcast. It's the Narrowgate Podcast.
Yep.
This is it.
Yep. And I'm Weston.
And I'm Logan.
And we're Narrowgate graduates.
Yeah.
How cool is that?
I think it's perfect.
When did you graduate?
I graduated September of 2007. I'm old school.
I graduated September of 2011.
Oh, right on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty cool.
Yeah, right on.
This is the Bill Spencer episode. I think all of you are familiar with Bill Spencer.
I know him.
I know him.
I know him.
I know him too. I think that it's pretty cool that that we got to just sit and ask Bill a bunch of questions.
Yeah, and let's all be honest. I mean, like as Narrowgate graduates and people who've interacted with Narrowgate, I bet all of us at some point have wondered, man, I wonder what Bill's thinking just right about now.
It'd be nice to have like a little bill in your pocket, wouldn't it?
You mean like a pocket bill? Yeah. We'll get into that.
Maybe we can introduce that later.
Yeah, maybe see what happens. I don't know.
So lots of cool stuff. This is less about Narrowgate Bill and more about Bill Spencer, the man, where he came from, what kind of makes him tick. Super interesting conversation.
We hope you enjoy it. Thanks for being here.
About 6 months ago, a new class had started. Stacy and I weren't here when they started for orientation. Maybe it's been a year ago. I don't remember. Don't even remember who the student was. I just got up one morning, went out, got a cup of coffee, and all the students were milling around getting ready for breakfast. And a guy walked up to me and introduced himself. Hey, we'll call him Ben. Okay. Hey, I'm Ben. His name's not Ben. I don't even know if we had a Ben. Hey, I'm Ben. I said, hey, I'm Billy. He goes, nice to meet you. What do you do around here? I went, not much, and walked away.
Really?
Really?
I thought that moment was like ripe with opportunity there, and you're just
that was the opportunity because I said not much and walked away, and then somebody grabbed him a few minutes later and went, dude, they live here. And he put it together and came back like an hour. I'm so sorry, man.
Yeah. So sorry I talked to you.
For asking me
Yeah.
what my name was. Like, what are you sorry for? Yeah. I think the really good ones we're not allowed to talk about.
Probably.
Yeah. Those are memorable. I told Colin, so I've never done a podcast before. And in fact, I don't think I've ever listened to a podcast before. So I'm going to need some help.
Yeah. Okay, well, I got to admit, I've listened to a few in an attempt to get like up to speed on what a podcast is and why they're out there and how and I hate them.
Yeah. We are off to a great start.
Yeah. Well, the best.
This is the Narrowgate Podcast.
Why do a Narrowgate podcast? From all of our intro banter, you
sounded like a Narrowgate student just then when you went, why? Why?
I am a Narrowgate student.
You never really stop being a Narrowgate student, do you?
Never. Mm-mm. But now we're doing an Narrowgate podcast.
This was an idea that I think probably sparked even a little before this at a graduate reunion where we gathered up a bunch of graduates who are working in vocational ministry and just discussed how do we connect? How do we connect better with graduates? How do we support continually graduates who are now out in the world and really putting our toolbox that we've gathered here into practice. And the idea of a podcast came up, and I have no idea why, because again, like Bill, I've never really been a podcast consumer, but for some reason I felt like fired up, like in my spirit of like, I don't know what this is going to look like. I was still in Texas at the time, not even sure that I would be here physically. And the idea of doing a podcast, I had no idea what it'd be like, but I knew that, man, this is an interesting idea. I feel fired up to explore this. So that's why I'm doing a Narrowgate podcast.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about you?
I bleed Narrowgate. So all things
Come
Narrowgate.
On, put that on a t-shirt.
Yeah, I'm in. And I think that any conversation that is held between Narrowgate family members is a conversation worth listening to. And so if we're going to talk with graduates, talk with pastors, talk with people who are part of the Narragate family, not part of the Narragate family, joining the Narragate family, all for an audience that is mostly Narragate graduates and hopefully beyond. I think that's a podcast worth doing. And so, like I said, I'm in.
Yeah, I tell you why I'm excited to be part of this conversation. And I'll do it in a story because people love story. Human beings are drawn to story. I was hanging out with an Narragate graduate recently, and we started talking about where he and his wife go to church on Sundays and what life is like day in and day out. He's got a brand new job that's pretty high stress and high demanding. His wife has a job that's pretty high stress and high demanding. And he talked about the church that they attend in Atlanta and asked him if it was a good church. And he said, yeah, it's a great church. And he told me the pastor of the church, which is a name that everyone would recognize. Well, yeah, that's a pretty good church. He said, but the truth is, the kind of teaching and conversations that happen at Narragate, we can't find it. It's not out there. And it started a whole nother conversation about it's not supposed to be out there. The beauty of Narragate is that the constraint of a time frame, it's not there. And church, classically, Sunday morning gatherings of the church, classically, is constrained by time because you've got kids that are being watched by somebody and they expect you to come get those kids in 45 minutes. Like there's a window there. So you take what you have to say and you package it in a way that you can deliver it within those constraints. And you guys know that's not Narragate. We sit down at night or we sit down, let's say we've got from 9 to 10:30 scheduled in the morning for a Bible study. Look, if 10:30 comes and we're in the middle of a conversation, whatever 10:30 holds can just wait because the conversation is more important than the schedule. And that's not true in day-to-day life aggregated by the church outside the walls of Narragate. I think that's one of the unique factors of Narragate that make our conversations worth listening to because that conversation happens until it comes to a logical pause point. It's never over. It just reaches a pause point. And then everybody's allowed to leave, think about it, and the next time we get together, you just pick the conversation up again. My hope is that this is that ongoing conversation for all the graduates who've had a pause in their response to us. This is a place for them to pick up and re-engage with us.
That is definitely very Narragate. Those conversations that are not constrained by time, because I know you're involved in church ministry.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I'm also involved in church ministry, and that time constraint really messed with me at first because I've tried to preach sermons and I just can't stick to the 40-minute, sermon.
And specifically in the area of ministry that I work in worship ministry, I mean, like when the Spirit of the Lord is there, you want to keep going for hours, and those kids got to get picked up. Yeah. Those kids got to get picked up.
It's almost like there needs to be
ministry.
an addendum on that verse that where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom, except for the temporal framework.
Yeah. You can even say specifically, again, except for when you got to pick up kids from kids ministry.
Yeah. I just can't
With
get behind the idea
to
of
those who serve in kids ministry. We
absolutely.
Love you, well, we're thankful for you.
Sure. I've got kids of my own, and those are.
But that is the beautiful thing, even about like, late night worship here in the lodge of just letting that go until the Spirit of the Lord said, "Oh, time for bed." And I got to say, there was something beautiful about sitting here in that living room of the lodge and discovering for me not only this call towards this ministry that God would call me into for my life, but also this idea of I used to come and sit down with students and I had a set list. I mean, I would sit down and I would make an order. And at the time, our community director like sat me down after a few weeks of doing this and said, "Hey, what would happen if we just showed up with no agenda, nothing but a guitar and the Holy Spirit? What would happen?" And that simple question has changed the way has changed the lens through which I look at my ministry, like to this day. Yes, we have to operate within those confines, and you learn to do that, but you learn to do it with this spirit of, God, I'm just here, and whatever you want to do with us, we're open to it. And I feel like that's something that happens in that physical space.
Yeah. But see, there's another beauty of Narragate. That idea that you just threw out, what if we showed up with no agenda and just did what the Spirit of God empowers us to do in the moment? That's a great idea for people who have lived a life of disciplined preparation, so that in the moment where the Spirit of God wants to reach inside and activate something, there is something to activate. If you take a complete novice structure where nobody knows anything, nobody can play guitar, nobody can sing, what is there to activate? I mean, you're dependent on completely miraculous encounters at that point. Yeah. But I think the cool thing about Narrowgate is that it's so filled with people who have spent so much time digging that they do have real answers. They do have real insight. Not the end of anything. That's crazy. There's not an end to God, so there's not an end to the study. There's not an end to the learning. But they've got real answers, real good questions, real good insight. Then you can show up like you. Logan, the talent you have is ridiculous. It's that gift that's been given to you. It's a gift that people could be jealous of. But you have taken years to refine and develop and hone that gift so that when you say, I don't need an agenda, I'm just going to show up. There's so much inside of you already that the Spirit of God can activate, empower. It becomes that charismata, that outflowing. It works. And that's true of teaching. That's true of open conversation. That's true of musical worship. That's true of prayer. In every aspect, that's one of the things I love about Narrowgate is that there are people present who are ready to take advantage of that moment. And they don't necessarily have to come prepared like we think of as scripted. They come prepared because it's already hidden in their heart from years of pursuit.
It's like that thing I think I remember you telling me once when a pastor gets up on stage or a preacher and he says, I don't know what I'm going to talk about this Sunday, but it's not that he doesn't know what he's going to preach. It's that he's got 5 sermons ready to go and he doesn't know which one of those he's going to choose,
Yeah.
It's
that's a good example,
that prepared freedom, to let the Spirit flow.
Well, how about this for our first segue? Bill, we want to get to know you a little bit better and hear a bit more about your upbringing.
Good. I'll bring Stacy in. She can tell you all about it.
We wouldn't be opposed to that, would we? But I mean, you grew up in Missouri, and most people / graduates may not know you as a person and kind of your upbringing. So if you could tell us, not you don't need to give us your whole life story, but what are the things that God began hiding in your heart that have made you ready and available for God to use you like he's using you now and has for the last 15, 20 years? Well, what are the things that you can look back on and say, man, these are seeds that God was, whether my community or environment was planting in my heart that God's using now?
Well,
it's a segue right there.
Yeah, that's a segue right there. I'll tell you 2 stories. The first, my dad got sick when I was a little kid. My biological father got sick and eventually died when I was a little kid. But because he got sick, we didn't have anything, like monetarily. We struggled. About a block from where I grew up, there was a little corner store. Now this is heartbeat, heartland, Midwest USA. Okay, this is northern Missouri on the Iowa border, and there's nothing there. But there was a little store about a block from where I lived. It was a corner store, and that was common in those little small towns that there was a corner store. It was called Clemmy's, Sue Clemmy, Clemy. She ran this little corner market, and there was a glass candy counter, and it had penny candy. That was a thing when I was a kid, which was in 1807. Okay, had this candy counter. And inside there was penny candy, and one of the penny candies that you could buy was called Sixlets. Now that was my choice because you got 6 little chocolate balls in a single cellophane wrapper, So you really got 6 pieces of candy for a penny, and I could make it stretch. But I didn't have any pennies. We didn't have money. I did have a little cowboy outfit, the little red plastic chaps with the fringe and the guns, the cap guns, had cap guns and my little hat, And so I'd get all decked up in my little cowboy outfit, and Mom would take me down to Clemmy's and stand me up on the counter. There was a song called Red Roses for a Blue Lady. You can go Google it or Shazam it or something. Well, it doesn't play, so you can't Shazam it. But and I'd stand up on the candy counter, and I'd put my thumbs in my front pockets, right? Cowboy look, man, have my shafts going on. And I said, I want some red roses for a blue lady. I'm like 3. I'm pushing 3 years old at this point. Mr. Flores, take my order, please. A 3-year-old kid singing this song. We had a little quarrel the other day. Hope these pretty flowers take the blues away, right? It was that kind of a crooner song. And I get all done, and for her wedding gown was the last line. And when I got done, people would start clapping, and I'd pull my thumbs out to open my front pockets up, and people would come up and drop pennies in my pocket. And the more pennies I could collect, the better. Because I would immediately empty my pockets, and where there once were pennies, there now were sixlets. And I was a happy kid, man. And what I learned was, if I stand in front of people, I can control how they feel. I can perform well enough to inspire them to do for me what I wanted to do. I learned how to perform when I was 2, 3 years old. Now that is a thing. How you use it can be selfish or selfless, either one. But I spent my whole life on a performance stage of sorts. I learned how to work a crowd and get back what I wanted, whether that was for selfish gain or for selfless. It didn't matter. I learned how to do it. There's one of the things about my life. Second story, not the second floor of a building, the second story I want to tell. Because we didn't have anything, my father passed, my mom remarried. The guy she married he was an unlocated lineman for Southwestern Bell Telephone Company, so he lived out of a hotel room and climbed telephone poles in the heat and the ice. It was a bad job. But they knew how to work, my mom and dad both. They had a really strong Midwestern work ethic. And when I was pretty young, they started buying old homes, old houses that were down by the college in the hometown where I grew up. And we started chopping those houses up and turning them into apartments. Eventually, we started building new duplexes and fourplexes. So I grew up my whole life working with my dad. When I was 13, my dad asked me if I was going to drive when I was 16 years old, which I thought was the stupidest question ever. Of course, I'm going to drive. And then he asked me, what do you want to drive? Meaning you're never going to drive one of my vehicles, ever, for as long as you live. So I had jobs when I was a kid that earned money. I mean, from cutting grass to being a janitor to paint and wallpaper store to making picture frames to selling men's clothing to car stereos. I had all kinds of stuff. But I made enough money to pay cash for a car when I was 16 years old. I bought a 69 Chevelle Super Sport when I was 16 years old and paid cash for it. But we learned how to work. It's not about the money we made. It's about the skill sets we had. And what I learned watching my mom and dad was, if they put their mind to do something, it got done. It was just that simple. My dad used to always say, if you can make it work on paper, you can make it work, but never forget it's going to be work. So I came up with those two things. I knew that I could perform and get people to move in a direction I wanted them to move, whether that was manipulation or influence, which those are separated by motivation, right? So whether it's influence or manipulation, I could move people in a direction. And I knew that I could set my mind on something, come up with a plan to execute it, and then if I was willing to pay the cost, we could get where we're going. Both of those played in heavily when Narrowgate was born. Because what I wanted was for guys like y'all to wake up one day and realize that there's real life to be had. And if I could present what I knew in a way that motivated you to take advantage of that, you would have life. And I was willing to work for it, and I didn't care what the cost was. As long as we got the outcome we wanted, that was okay. And pretty much for everybody that's come through Narrowgate, that's been mine and Stacy's dream. Whatever price we have to pay, so be it. If it means that somebody gets to understand that there's real life and they get to sink their teeth into that and get their hands wrapped around it in a way that they cannot be separated from it for all of eternity, that's a win. That's better than sixlets all day long.
That's better than sixlets. That's good.
That's another t-shirt.
I wonder something comes to mind about that idea about performance. Myself and in the ministry that I'm in, or some of our graduates or other listeners who might even, different areas of life, whether they're in sales or whether they're in other areas of industry or leadership. Do you have any kind of encouragement about how you can kind of center the good things about performance?
Let's start with this. Just because you enjoy something, that doesn't make it selfish. Just because you benefit from something, that doesn't make it selfish. The truth is, if you invest in other people's lives and real relationship is developed because you've made the sacrifice first, Jesus even said, Cast your bread on the waters, right? What you reap is what you're going to sow. When you give to others, the paradigm of the kingdom is that you get in the giving. You receive back what you spend out. So if you start in a relationship by asking, what is it that I already possess that I can give so that someone else can advance? There's a real likelihood that someone else is going to reach back into your life in gratitude and invest in you in a similar way. There's some kind of it's not a quid pro quo even. It's just the nature of relationship. We do for people that we love. We just do. So let's go back to performance. Let's ask it that way. How do you know if you're being selfish or selfless? It's probably both and. I mean, at some point, the motivation of the pleasure that you get is probably real. But if you think about what Paul said to the Romans, when he's picking up that last half of the book, so start in chapter 12, okay, let's forget about 8, 9, 10, or 9, 10, 11. When he starts in 12, he says, offer yourselves as a living sacrifice. Well, in order to be a living sacrifice, some life has to be molded to start with. And he's going to address it to the Corinthians. It's like a foot and a hand, an eye and an ear, right? We all do what we do. You've been molded. Weston, you've been molded to be a specific way. You have specific gifts and talents. You are a thing within the body. And Logan, we've already talked about the gift and the talent that you have. What you guys do is disparate but completely conjoined. It's separated, but it's unified, just like a foot and a hand. If you offer yourselves as a living sacrifice, it means all those things that have been molded in you, whether they were born by selfish motivation, sixlets on a candy counter, or whether they were born from selfless and sacrificial experiences, it doesn't matter. It made you who you are. And when you become that living sacrifice and you say, Christ, live through me. Here this is. You do with this life whatever you want. Then maybe it comes out as a great musical performance. And the response from the crowd feels fantastic. You feed off that, right? Mm-hmm. Or maybe it's a great Bible teaching. It's a great sermon that you deliver at the refuge one Sunday morning. And you feed off that. There's pleasure in that. But that doesn't make it selfish. Mm-hmm. I would imagine Jesus had incredible pleasure numerous times during his life, yet never once was he selfish. Never once. So if you take what you have in the workplace where you are, and you say, how do I spend what I am by allowing Christ to exhaust that through me for the benefit of others, you'll establish relationship that you benefit from in the end, because relationship's the greatest value we have in the world. Building that relationship is how you move forward in life. We never do it individually unless we want to do it at the cost of others. We always do it collectively for the benefit of all.
I'm not sure I've ever once thought about how much Jesus enjoyed, like got joy out of doing the things that he was good at.
Yeah.
I've never actually thought through that.
I've even thought about some of the pictures in the text. And sorry, I'm scooting around on the couch making all kinds of noise here, but I've even thought about some of the pictures in text, like when he walked his guys all the way up to Caesarea Philippi and stood them on Pan's Theater. Like, he had a kick out of just looking at their face. I mean, here's a bunch of teenage Jewish kids, and what's just happened, man. What's just gone down, and it's just wrong. I mean, the sacred goats, come on, man. And he's just watching the expression on their face. There had to be something inside of him that just took a little bit of pleasure in seeing their discomfort in the moment, because he knew that they were going to learn how to overcome that discomfort by interjecting what is holy and good and right into a world that so desperately needs holy and good and right. But in that moment, it was pretty uncomfortable for him. So I imagine he had a lot of moments like that where it wasn't so much disgust or irritation or, you little faiths, come on, grow. There was just that sort of giggle point of, I'm just sitting here watching you guys standing on this big rock trying to figure out what we're doing here.
Yeah, I was thinking about all the things that make you, and the performance aspect of your personality and your giftings and strengths. Tying it back to that sixlet story is interesting to me. But one of the other things that stands out about you is your interest in learning and, your knowledge of a wide array of different topics, whether it be the Bible, a big one, whether it be, electrical systems or, pretty much anything.
Treehouse construction.
Yeah, all these things. And it's not that a lot of people have asked me, like, how does Bill know so much? And I'll just say he's just learned so much. Do you have any stories that you could attach to, where did this love for learning and knowledge come from?
I think I'll go back to what we talked about before. When I was a kid, we learned how to do things because we couldn't afford to pay somebody to do them. And the benefit of it on the backside was real. So I don't have a love for learning from a classical academic sense. Mm-hmm. Like you set me in a classroom and I'm not that guy. I don't thrive. Yeah. Not necessarily having an aptitude for academic excellence in a classic Western environment doesn't make you less of a learner. I think I always learned what I was desperate to learn, what I wanted to learn. So the Bible, for instance, when you wake up one day and realize what a train wreck you actually are, and then you get a taste of the hope of what could be, that desperation sets in to learn, how do I get from train wreck to back on the rails? And once you get a taste of something good, it's sixlets all over again. I sang a song and I got some sixlets. Hey, take me back down to Clemmy's. Let's do it again. And a success builds on a success with a hunger in a way that it just gives way to another success, which only increases the hunger. So it doesn't really matter what it is we're doing. If it's building tree houses or it just doesn't matter. There is a desire to have something, to accomplish something, to see something come to fruition. And if you know it's going to take a cost, but the cost has a benefit, and you believe that you can, which I think that's a big part of it. It's just that, well, you can till you can't. Just adopt that mentality. Yeah. And if you just start from a position of, no, we can, let's go. And we will until we realize that we can't. Yeah. Think of what confidence you'd have if you didn't first have courage. Because without courage to try, you have no success. And without success, you have no confidence that if you simply muster the courage, you can succeed again.
The whole podcast on that right there, courage and confidence.
I mean, what would you say to like, I don't know, somebody, a young adult ages 18 to 30. How old are we now? Oh, we'll go up to 40. say to somebody who's sitting here listening and they're like, you know what? I don't have either of those. I don't have confidence or courage. And not only that, but I live in America and I don't come from a place of lack. I mean, because let's be honest, like a lot of us aren't, we're not coming from the same place that you came from as a child. What would you say to somebody who's lacking that hunger?
First, I'd say it's not true. I don't have courage or confidence. If that's the statement, I would just say in blanket fashion, that's not true. Now, you may not have the level of courage that you wish you had. If you have the kind of confidence that you wish you had, then now what you have is hubris. I mean, that's just, you've crossed over a line that nobody even wants to be around you. Courage, I mean, it's on the sword. Every Narragansett graduate has it. It's the first word on the sword. It says courage, honor, nobility. And we've talked about often, that's just selflessness. So you get to ask the question. You said, tell you. So you, Logan, do you have the capacity to be selfless?
Yes.
Then you have courage. That's it. And we've used I think the example in Erwin McManus's book, Uprising, is a great one. He says, a firefighter standing in front of a burning building, running in to save someone's life, we all go, look what courage. No, that guy's scared to death, or he's insane, one of the two. He's scared, but he's selfless enough to put his needs aside for the greater good of someone else. That's courage expressed. Courage is not the absence of fear, it's the absence of self, or at least the diminishment of self for the good of others. So let's start with this. If you say, I have no courage, that's not true, because everyone has the capacity to be selfless, which means everyone already has the potential for courage. It just has to be exercised. And maybe that's what you're saying. I don't exercise my potential to the fullest. Well, okay, then get your butt in gear. Yeah. Start exercising. When you do that, it breeds a level of confidence. Now, everybody's got confidence. It's like everybody's got faith, right? You take a breath in, you've got faith. You somehow believe that what you're breathing is not going to kill you, that you're going to live. Or you get in a car and drive, and you trust that people are going to stay on their side of the road. We all have faith and hope. Well, we all have confidence at some level. I think what people are saying is, I wish I possessed more of it. And I think the prescription that we could offer is, the more selflessly you live, the more courageously you live. And the more courageously you live, the more you'll realize that that selflessness is honored and blessed by God, and that will build a confidence that Christ in you is the hope of glory.
That's good.
Yeah,
I needed to hear it. I just had a feeling others needed to hear it too.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. And that's it. We've just been studying the book of Romans, and it takes me back to that. You know, tribulation produces perseverance, and perseverance, character, and character, hope. Like, you don't get the confidence without the challenging opportunities to persevere through those hardships in order to gain that confidence. You don't know until you try.
Yep. Got to be hard before you can have perseverance, right? You have to have, you don't persevere through the easy times.
Right. You don't have courage in the face of simple, easy, situations. I kind of have a random question that may not be.
We could debate whether or not random actually exists.
Okay, perfect.
Let's do that. Let's get weird.
So you're saying God's not sovereign? Is that the inference?
Is that the implication?
Yes, of course. There's a whole separate episode that we're going to do that's completely, No,
wow. There's Calvinism, and then there's Arminianism, then there's Molinism, and then there's Westonism.
Yeah, and it's the worst one.
Those last two I've never heard of before.
It's bad.
Anyway,
it's bad.
Sorry, go back. Random question.
We're talking about you, right? I mean, in your background.
Let's not.
We're supposed to be.
No, there's this thing. I promise you, there are people who are listening that have experienced this as a student or even as a graduate. There's this thing that happens that I watch happen in different guys' eyes whenever you come into the room, right? They just freeze. What do you want to say to those people that have you on such a high level of esteem that's almost unreasonable, in my opinion?
Immediately text one of you guys so you can tell them just how unimpressive I really am.
There are people who are listening, I'm sure, that are like, "Oh, Bill's on," and like from a real place of like, I know you as humble. I know you as like, you don't go around tooting your own horn. You don't think that you hung the moon. And it's one of the reasons that I respect you. Because if you put yourself on the same pedestal that others did, that would be very unimpressive. And
confidence leading to hubris.
That's right. And so like, say that.
Look, as a student, I want some of that. There's a benefit in that. And I know it may, to the recipient, it may feel a little bit selfish, but just let me explain. Mm-hmm. I think one of the most effective methodologies for learning that Narrowgate has ever employed is the ability to have an encounter that knocks somebody off center. You got to do that. The first thing that happens is you have to push people off balance. If you get somebody off balance by offering them information they don't currently have, perspective they don't have, a challenge to something they say, which that's just it's a gift that I've honed as a skill, like he's honed, like Logan has honed music to a skill, right? It's a gift that he honed. There's an ability to hear anything that anybody says, immediately dissect it, twist their words, and hand it back to them in a way that irritates them to death.
I think everybody listening probably knows that very well too.
But it's a gift, right? And it's intentional. Because if I can take everything you say, twist it, and hand it back, and irritate you enough that you get off center, eventually we're going to get to a place where there's a meaningful question that you can be left with. And if you can be left with that meaningful question, you don't need to know anything that I know. You don't need to have an encounter with me. If you're left with your question and you can deal with that question between you and God, you're going to move forward. So some of that off balance stuff is intentional. It's designed. But anybody that has known me for any period of time, after a while, all of that, the ability to do that to somebody just died. You guys don't let me do that to you. It's, you know better, that like you learn it. So I'd say people that are there, maybe we just haven't known each other long enough yet. Thought bubbles.
Oh yeah.
I think if everybody could see all the thought bubbles about how people really feel about themselves, a lot of that would die.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the level of regret or remorse or wish for different that exists every time I look in the mirror, it's no different than everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
I wish I was somebody different just like everybody else does. But you get old enough to, I think, kind of embrace what your flaws are and recognize that a lot of those flaws are what God uses to keep you humble enough that you stay desperate for his presence so that he can do something good through your weakness. Maybe that's what Paul meant, you know. When I'm weak, well, the truth is we're always weak.
Yeah.
You know, that other, when I'm strong, no, we're never strong. We're always weak. I think maybe he's saying in the moments where I recognize just how weak I really am, that's where he shows up best. So I think if people could know what I see when I look in the mirror, maybe they'd feel a whole lot more comfortable just giggling and pointing their finger at me and going on, you know.
What's in your thought bubble, Logan?
On all the topics that you could possibly teach on, if there were like one or two things that you would want to impress upon, that you would want to teach to graduates listening right now, again, some who are now in their 40s, some who now have families. I mean, Weston and I have children. I mean, guys who are in
with our wives.
Yes, with our wives.
Yeah.
We don't have children together.
I had a thought bubble right there. I don't know if you guys saw it, but when you say Weston and I have children,
y'all gonna call me out on that
I
now.
just wanted to clarify that with a hard and fast statement. Yeah.
Weston and I are married to different people who are women. And with those women, we have each had, how many children do you have now?
3.
I also have 3 children now.
You're not doing yourself any favors right now.
You see how calm and collected I sound right now? This
Check
is
out his thought bubble, yeah.
My point being, we've got guys who've either men and women of all ages who've interacted with Narrowgate at different seasons in life. What if there's like one message that you think that you would want to teach in this moment that could cut through all of them? What would that be?
You know, that's a really unfair question.
I know it is, but it's on the paper and I'm going to read it.
Yeah. Did Colin put that on the paper?
He did.
Yeah. See, Colin put that on the paper because he knew he wasn't going to have to ask that question. You were going to have to ask it.
I flowered it up a little bit, but yeah.
Now we're back to there aren't any simple answers. And here's why. I don't remember the name of the theologian. Okay, we'll just tell the story then. There was a great theologian, somewhat controversial. Some of his closest disciples, proteges, were around him on his deathbed. At a moment of lucidity toward the end of life, they ask a similar question. What's the most profound thing you learned? What's the single message? It's that question you just asked. And quietly started singing, Jesus loves me, this I know. Because the profundity in the simplicity is just stunning. So you start with Jesus, okay? Jesus loves me. Jesus. As soon as you've got your head wrapped around that, go ahead and hold your hand up in this conversation and we'll move on. Like, do you understand that? God incarnate, the Word of God, who made absolutely everything, limited himself to mortality and flesh and tabernacled among. No, for all of life. I will die, you will die. We will move from here to heaven and never, ever understand that. Loves. Okay, do you get that one? You got your head wrapped all the way around love, right? Like you get that one. Me. You're done. Like just those 3 words. Jesus loves me. So what do I want to teach? Jesus loves you. And I can't teach that. And the older I get, the more I realize I can't teach that. So the things that I want to teach now, at 61 years old, I feel like Solomon sitting down to write, to his kid Rehoboam, the book of Ecclesiastes. It's like, I'm going to write all this stuff to you and you're not going to understand any of it. Because you have to be as old and filled with sorrow and regret and repentance and gratitude and hope. You have to have all of that inside to begin to understand what I think I'm beginning to understand that I also know I'll never fully understand. So what's the single lesson? Stand in awe of God. Do what he says. because that's man's everything. That's it. Luke 15, okay. Romans 1-8, okay. Book of Ruth, okay. They're all saying the same thing over and over and over and over. I, God, love you for no reason other than that's who I am. And I just want you to accept that and respond to it.
Karl Barth.
Thank you. Karl Barth, thank you. That was going to
We'll just
kill
edit that
me.
in.
That was killing me, man.
Were you doing it too?
Fact checkers in the background. Karl Barth. Whew.
He was controversial, right?
He was controversial. Yeah. Let's don't like go study
Don't
up on
deep
Karl
dive it?
Barth
Yeah,
and
okay.
become disciples of Karl Barth.
Can I ask you a follow-up question?
Yeah,
How
man.
do you personally, just where you're at in life right now, is there anything that you do that you enjoy where you most experience the awe of God? Is there any type of thing that you set aside for your own personal enjoyment what's the best way that you enjoy God?
Both and.
All of it?
Oh, and
It's all of it, man. And that's the beauty of life. It's like, I have my quiet time in the morning. Look, I don't have quiet time in the morning. Have you been in the lodge? There's nothing quiet in the lodge. It's never quiet in the lodge. People are banging pots. 6 o'clock in the morning, people are banging pots and pans on the other side of my bedroom wall and screaming at each other. And there's no quiet time. The quiet is inside. It's this morning. And look, I don't do this a lot, okay? But this morning, I was reading Edersheim's commentary on Luke, the 3 parables in Luke in 12, 13, and 14, leading up to 15, right? And how they all apply to the Pharisees. And there are moments where I get completely lost in somebody else's thought about God because it helps me see God differently. It helps me see what Jesus was facing differently. But I don't get up every morning and open Edersheim's commentary up. I don't, I read 2 Psalms and 4 chapters from the Gospels. No, I don't. Is it right to do? Absolutely. Especially in your youth as a follower of Jesus, read as a discipline. Because like we say, when the words of God become the words of you, then you'll finally have something worth saying. It's that always be completely prepared so that in the moment, the Spirit of God has all those assets to work with. So where's the moment where I enjoy God most? Looking at the ocean's pretty enjoyable. It really is. And popping out of my bedroom and seeing a bunch of guys with Bibles opened on the dining room tables at the lodge, that's pretty enjoyable. And me and Stacy drove a 2-lane country road that we'd never driven before yesterday on the way over to a buddy's house. And that was pretty enjoyable. And watching the thunderstorm roll in, that's pretty enjoyable. And standing on a Sunday morning and watching Narrowgate guys who have never expressed themselves physically and emotionally in worship, that's pretty enjoyable. And, I could keep going. It's all of it, man. It's both and. It's all of it.
Got a little emotional during that answer, so I'm gonna say my next thing slowly. I think that's something that we, in the hustle and bustle of life, I'm sure a lot of us forget to slow down and just enjoy God. And
but you don't have to, Logan. You don't even have to slow down.
Yeah.
You just have to realize at the pace, like marathon runners don't stop to get a drink of water.
Yeah.
They drink while they're running. Love God in all of it, at all times, in all living sacrifice, all the time, even in the middle of the pace. Just recognize, I'll never leave you. I'll never forsake you. I'm going to be with you always, even in the pace, even to the end of the age. You get there, then it's back to what if everything you did every single day was actually some expression of Christ living through you? At pace, at rest, at all of it. That's the Christian life.
Well, Bill, thank you for spending your time on a podcast. The Narrowgate podcast.
Can you believe it?
Are we going to spell it with 2 E's? The Narrowgate podcast.
The
Narrowgate.
Might even
Narrowgate.
do a little TH apostrophe just to make it.
Apostrophe.
Could it be DA apostrophe?
Duh. Might be not okay. No, nope.
It didn't fit.
Nope.
Okay, I'm blowing this whole thing. You're trying to do something nice, and I'm taking your words and twisting them and handing them back to you.
That's
Because
used to it.
it's
I mean,
what
I've
I do.
been here for over a decade now, so quite used to that little twisting. But yeah, I appreciate you more than I just appreciate you being here. I appreciate you.
I love you guys.
Yeah.
I really do. This has been not just honor, but joy to sit with you guys.
Yeah.
Thank you, Bill.
Likewise.
Yeah.